If I'm correct, you have 3 rings. Where do you keep the rings? How often do you flex them for your friends?
They're tucked away. I don't wear them a lot. I don't. I even forgot to have it on yesterday, which I'm halfway out to Arlington, and I'm like, oh my god, one of those occasions where you really like to have that Super Bowl ring on your finger, and I left it. I left it at home in the safe. So,
If like
whoops.
cousins are coming over, do you pull them out because they know they're going to want to ask to see them, right?
The Super Bowl ring, believe it or not, one of the cool things that Jerry Jones did for us was he gave us replica Super Bowl trophies.
Oh,
So the
that's
one
cool.
that everybody wants to see, because those are out on display in my office. So when people come over and they see that, they always want a picture taken with the replica Lombardi trophy. So that probably gets a little bit more attention than the ring, believe it or not. But yeah, once they see the trophy, then they ask about the ring. So you get the picture with both of them.
Before you played ball at Syracuse and you were in high school, were you like the ultimate athlete? Did you play every position?
Yeah, high school was fun. Small high school, gosh, if I was to think about our total roster, we might have had 27 guys, total on our roster. And with that, we had, probably, a significant amount of those 27 were playing both ways, offensively and defensively. So, being from a small town and being on a, kind of that small stage of football, um, I was a running back. I was a outside linebacker. I punted. I kicked. Um, so, but that was all because of, growing up as a kid, the punt, pass, and kick competitions. I competed in those, and I actually made it all the way down to the AFC finals one year. So I was one win away from going to the Super Bowl, and probably had the worst punt I have ever done in my entire life
How long was
on
it?
the big the Alamo Dome. When they went all the way out and then they started bringing it back along the straight line, it was creeping closer and closer towards me. I think it probably at the end netted about 25 yards.
Yeah, that's about max for me though. Yeah, that'd have been my total. So in college, when did it start to transition like your role? Because you ran the ball, but then at some point, obviously they knew you could block and play the fullback position. When did that start to fill for you?
But the big thing for me in Syracuse was we were an option-based offense. So we ran a number of different ways to do the option, and then part of that was also some of the power game that you see in today's NFL. The pin and pulls and things like that. So we were very versatile. So for me as a fullback, it allowed me to show my ability as a ball carrier, to show my ability as a blocker, even as a pass receiver. Not a whole lot, but a few opportunities there. So it was funny when I came to Dallas and became the fullback in that offense. And there's not really a lot of opportunity to carry the football. And, people kind of look back at some of my college stats and they didn't realize, that I had over 100 carries, every season. I was a starter at Syracuse. So when I left Syracuse University, I was in the top 10 rushing of all time. And I mean, that's, Jim Brown, Floyd Little, Larry Zonka, and I was kind of hanging in there with them. I'm not in there anymore, but when I graduated in 1989, I was in the top 10 in rushing.
These guys now before the Super Bowl, they have 2 weeks. When you were playing, did they have the 2 week gap or was it just the 1 week gap?
We actually had both. We had a 2 week gap, and then we also had in our second Super Bowl in Atlanta, we had a 1 week gap, and that was actually the game, the championship game. Troy got a concussion, so that was very challenging. That was a quick turnaround. The 2 weeks would have been huge for us that year, but we were on that 1 week schedule that season. And if you go back and watch that game, that's why Emmitt Smith was the MVP in that game. We really leaned heavily on the run game, to make sure that Troy was okay in the pocket and was going to be able to finish that game and didn't take any unnecessary hits.
So then my assumption is you like the 2 week better than the one. It gave everybody a chance to rest and get healthy.
Well, rest and get healthy, and then logistically, how much you have to do. When you have the 2 weeks, you win the championship game, you get your ticket allotment, you find out what all that is, you can start to work on bringing family and friends to the game. That gives them the opportunity to coordinate flights, hotels. There's so many things that go on besides the game in that short week that made it really, really challenging. And it was very different back then. Tuesday was media day. And both teams kind of alternated, during the course of Tuesday. So your arrival day was Monday. You just played the game Sunday. I think we were actually late that that year. So we were the second game on Championship Sunday. So you're getting a late start. Really no time to celebrate. I mean, you're going right into planning mode, and then you're on a flight, the next morning to head down to the host city, to get in, get settled, and then boom, you hit the ground running on Tuesday. So the 1 week was really challenging, and from virtually every perspective you can think of, and I'm sure it was challenging for the NFL as well. Kind of getting all those assets, off of championship locations down into the host city that was being prepped. So yeah, I'm glad they've moved to that 2 week window and really made that kind of the staple now, because having done them both ways, I would never wish upon anybody, that 1 week time frame, especially as big as the game has gotten now, and how many logistical things that they're going to have to deal with.
My friend here in the studio who's wearing a sling, broken arm, but he is a massive Cowboys fan, been his whole life. And so, Eddie, I'd like for you to meet my friend Daryl.
What's up, Daryl? Good to meet you, man.
What you do? What'd you do with the arm, Eddie?
It's not a good story. I went roller skating with my kids. It was my youngest kid's birthday, and I fell. We were racing, and I fell, broke my radius bone.
Did you put the arm out to brace?
I did. I tried to fall on my hands, but I guess the force kind of made a little snap right here. Anyway, that's not important, Daryl. Here's the important question. One of my favorite things in the world when you were playing was to yell "Moose" every single time you got the ball. Did you like that? There was no social media then, so for me, it was just I heard other people do it, so I started doing it. But when did that start, and did you even like it?
No, it's funny because a lot of people think that the nickname followed me from Syracuse, but it actually originated in Dallas. Babe Laufenberg was one of our backup quarterbacks, and when we started practice, you go through team stretch and then you go into individual period. And the running backs for individual are all the way down on the opposite end of the field, in the corner. And we were usually the last group that came all the way back up to the front end of the field to get ready to work offensive group, which is everybody but the offensive line. So as we were jogging down the field, everybody else was kind of waiting for us. So, Babe always said, when you guys head this way, you look like a moose walking in a field of deer, because I was 6'2", 245. My backup fullback at that time, Broderick Sargent, was a shorter, stockier build. He was probably 5'10", 240-ish. And then all the running backs, at that time were under 6 foot as well. So at 6'2", coming that way, just looked a little bit larger than everybody else. So just this innocent comment like that, became the genesis of the nickname. And then it got on to local radio. Brad Sham, who did the Cowboy games on radio, started to use it during his broadcasts. And then Troy shared it with John Madden during a production meeting before a game one time. And then John used it on the broadcast, and that was the end of Daryl. And Moose was the moniker. And I kind of differentiate between people. If they call my name, if they call Daryl or DJ, especially because DJ means that's a college connection. Somehow there's a connection to college if somebody calls me DJ. But if it's a Moose, then it definitely comes to the Dallas area. So just by being summoned, I know kind of the time frame of when we should have met.
Were the 90s just the best time of your life? Because you were winning, we were winning, and I feel like the Cowboys and anyone on the Cowboys was just on top of the world in the mid-90s.
Yeah, I had a heck of a run, even going back into the late 80s. At Syracuse, we got on a roll my junior and senior year. We were 11-0 my junior year, got tied in the Sugar Bowl by Auburn, and finished 11-0-1. My senior year, we ended up 10-2. Had two horrible games during the course of the season. Played terrible at Ohio State. Played terrible at West Virginia. I think we had 11 turnovers total in both of those games. But we ended up beating LSU in the Hall of Fame game. So had two really good seasons at Syracuse to wrap up my college career, and then boom, walk into 1-15. So it was a big adjustment. And then you started to see the talent that was on that roster. And then just the way that Jimmy was going to build it. I'm a big culture guy. I still think that football players need a lot of discipline. We're young boys in a big body, playing a violent game, and we need a little bit of that thumb on the top. So you could see a lot of these pieces coming together, and Norv Turner was really that final piece that we brought in getting ready for the 91 season. So yeah, once we got on a roll there, it was just it was a unique time when you really kind of look at all those players and all those coaches coming together at that one point in time, and then being able to max out that opportunity. I think that's one of the things that you see that sometimes doesn't happen, is all these different things are coming together, and you see a group not maximize that opportunity for one reason or another. And I'll always be proud of our guys for really kind of recognizing what was happening, and then maximizing that opportunity and winning those 3 Super Bowls in 4 years.
Final 3 questions for you. The Chiefs going for a three-peat, something you guys almost, how hard is that to just repeat, much less three-peat?
Yeah, well, just getting to the game, that was one of the things that I hadn't really spent a whole lot of time like digging into. But when you go back and you look at the Packers and the Steelers twice, and us, the Patriots, the Broncos, all these teams that had that opportunity to win 3 in a row, none of us made it back to that third Super Bowl. They're the first team to actually make it back to the Super Bowl, to have the opportunity to win 3 in a row. So, that just by itself is a tremendous feat, because that's never been done before. So there's a little bit of skill, there's a little bit of luck. Again, it's Kansas City maximizing the opportunity that's been presented to them, with Andy Reid as the head coach, and Steve Spagnuolo as the defensive coordinator, and Patrick Mahomes as your guy. And you've watched that team kind of shift and change during Patrick's career, and you've watched that team shift and adjust to what the changes are, and still be able to stay on top of the AFC West, of the AFC conference, and really the NFL. So it's been very impressive, because one of the things that generated the change to free agency was the prevention of the dynastic teams. What we had in Dallas. We were half of my career the old business way, which was draft and develop, and not a lot of player movement back and forth, to the second half of my career, free agency, where you can get better quickly. And you saw a lot of worst to first scenarios in several divisions, where teams drafted well, but then also signed free agents well, and all of a sudden you've got this really, really good gelling of talent. That is something that's really hard to do in today's NFL, and for Kansas City to be able to do that year after year. And you go back and just watch the transformation when it's Patrick in the early days of his career with Tyreek and all those guys on the offensive side of the ball. It was the offense, and they were explosive, and you're going to have to outscore them. Well, now it's the defense, and it's Patrick understanding, if I just don't make critical mistakes and turn the ball over, this group has got a great opportunity to win the game, because we can lean on our defense now. And Steve Spagnuolo has done a great job over the last 2-3 seasons as they've adjusted and kind of gone through this change. So that's one of the most impressive things for me, for Kansas City, as they sit here, on the threshold of doing something that nobody's ever done before in the Super Bowl era.
Final 2 questions. What'd you think of Coach Schottenheimer getting the promotion to Dallas?
I like Brian as a man. I don't know him well as a coach. I do know the history and the lineage of the name, especially. Marty Schottenheimer is one of my favorite guys. Always enjoy playing against his teams. They were always physical. Coached very, very well, very disciplined. So all the things that I talked about with Jimmy, that's something that Brian's been around. I'm interested to see what he does with this opportunity. It's his first time, as a head coach in the NFL. I don't think it's a risky hire. When Jerry talked about that, a lot of these coaches, go through that similar process. At some point you've got to be a first-time head coach. Jacksonville's doing it with Liam Cohen. There's risk there for them to bring in, Liam Cohen. So this is something that's kind of become, it's the process. When you get to the NFL, at some point you've got to go out and hire a first-time, NFL head coach. Jerry did it with Jimmy in an unconventional way, bringing a guy from the college ranks up, and had tremendous success. And I think that's the point that he's trying to make. When I step outside of the box and do something a little bit differently, I have reaped rewards when I've done that. So, that'll be something that he's going to be able to, talk to the media about. But I think it's been one of those things. I think what has happened with Dallas, and for the first time, I saw Michael Irvin as critical as I've seen Michael who's been a great ambassador for, the Dallas Cowboys, in his post-career days. Even him a little bit frustrated. And sure, he wanted Deion Sanders, who's a good friend of his, to have that opportunity. But that's the first time I've seen Michael, that frustrated. So, that's kind of really the microcosm of the entire fan base. And, I think the perspective that everybody looks at it, and not a knock on Brian Schottenheimer, but if we're going to stay status quo, why didn't we stay status quo with Mike McCarthy at the top? So I think that's the one thing that everybody walks away after that announcement is the question of, if the real incentive was not to have a lot of change so we could continue to move forward, with what we have in place now, why wouldn't we have just stayed with Mike McCarthy? I do like the Matt Eberflus hire. I've always been a fan of his. His defenses have always been very, very productive, very, very challenging. We had the Chicago Bears several times this year, and we had him after Matt was fired as head coach, and there was a new defensive coordinator that was kind of installing and doing the game planning. And, part of this defense is allowing the players to play fast, which means we're not going to complicate things. I think Matt always adds enough. I think he straddles that line really, really well, where it's a fundamental defense and it's got its strengths, and we allow our players to play fast. But we do have a couple of wrinkles that are going to challenge you offensively. And I think really at the end there, Chicago kind of oversimplified that and maybe lost a little bit of that creativity that Matt brings to it. But I thought that was a good hire by Brian, and I think it's going to be interesting to see, how they pair it together. But, I think the big question the fan base has is, if we're going to stay in-house, why didn't we just stay with Coach McCarthy?
Finally, what's been fulfilling about being an executive that maybe you didn't think would be as fulfilling as it is?
You start to find the joy in the game in not what you do, but what in others do. And this goes all the way back to, 2019 with my time in the Alliance of American Football, or 2020 with my time in the XFL in the first iteration. There's a couple of guys that are still in the NFL today, from those teams that I was the general manager of. And you take a lot of pride in the fact that you've changed the trajectory of a young man's life now that he's spent 4 years, 5 years with an NFL salary, as opposed to, a spring football salary. That's a substantial difference. So that makes you feel good. And, I think one of the bigger things for us too is these leagues, especially the last, when you talk about, the XFL, the first iteration being closed down during the pandemic, as Legacy USFL and Legacy XFL came back up and started to play football again, and then the merger into the UFL, a lot of these guys are coming through COVID and a lot of different things that happened, and they just got lost. So the opportunity to really kind of dig back in and find some players who came through 2-3 years of a really challenging and confusing time, and maybe fell off of everybody's radar, to give them a stage to be able to go back out on and perform. And then just guys that, the competitiveness of the NFL and staying on that 53-man roster year after year after year is very challenging. And for a guy that's fallen out of favor, a guy that's had an injury that's coming back off of it, that has an opportunity to come into our league and really, change that narrative of how an NFL front office sees him, how an NFL personnel department sees him, give him the opportunity to put him on 10 stages and get some great film where the NFL scouts can look at him and say, I didn't realize that was an element to his game. And I think we've seen that from a couple of guys. I think Adrian Martinez is a great one from last year. I think Alex Magoo is a great one from Legacy USFL. We've got some players out there that are able to step down in here and really work on their craft. And I think that's why, what we provide in the spring is critically important to the entire football landscape, because there's been a reduction in the amount of time that the guys can spend at the collegiate level. Now, this was pre-NIL. I mean, the college landscape for athletics is like the Wild West right now when you talk about NIL money. I mean, we got guys that are staying in college instead of going to the NFL because they're making more money. Who would have thought that was ever going to be possible? But, at first, when they first started to do this, it made sense, right? Because you're a student athlete. You're not an athlete student. So we go to college to play the game that we love, maybe have an opportunity to continue our career professionally, but also to get an education and graduate with a diploma. Is the movement there to make sure that some of those things happen and we reduce the time that the players have to work on their craft. You started to see guys coming into the NFL that weren't as detailed as they were in previous years. So along that same time, the 2010 CBA was another area where now the NFL is restricting time in the off season. It's restricting time at training camp. It's limiting padded practices. It's doing some things that sometimes when you're worried about player safety, also those unintended consequences, it has an impact on the quality of the game. I really think that what we provide in the UFL, because we have coaches like Wade Phillips and Mike Nolan and Bob Stutz and Skip Holtz, and we provide opportunity for an Anthony Beck and a Curtis Johnson and some young guys, a Reggie Barlow, to kind of look at that and see what the opportunities are there. That's great stuff. And then we need another head coach, and we have Ken Wisenhunt call us because he's interested in doing joining us and playing a role in this. So we have really, really good head coaches that have a great network of stats. So they're able to put together these staffs and afford our players more time to work at the task of getting better at their position. Because when we talk about these restrictions that happen at practice, whether it's at the collegiate level or the professional level, one of the first things that comes off the board is that individual period that we talked about when I got my nickname. We're down at the end of the field and we're working on just running back stuff, and the tight ends are working on just tight end stuff, and the O-line is working on just O-line stuff. And then you come back together and you start to work as a group, work as a team, kind of bring those three phases together. The individual period is the one that's either been shrunk or sometimes actually eliminated from the practice schedule. And that's where a guy has the opportunity to work with his coach to get better at things. And I think the offensive line is a huge spot. How much time do the quarterbacks get to sit with the quarterback coach in the film room, watching the practice tape? Those are the areas of concern that I think that anybody would have as a fan with the game of football when you look at some of the restrictions that have been put in place over the last 10 or 15 years. So for us at the UFL, to be able to provide that coaching, that teaching at the individual level that will help these guys the next time they get an opportunity to have the chance to be on an NFL 53-man roster, we've sharpened those skills at the position that helps them stand out in the group, whether it's the offensive side of the ball or the defensive side of the ball. So for me, that's been the most rewarding thing is watching our guys go up. And I think when you go back and you look at everything, accounting for legacy USFL, legacy XFL, and then last season as the UFL, we've got 38 guys that we've put back into the NFL on 53-man rosters. And as we talked about, that is life-changing for a young man when you talk about the financial impact that's going to have on him.
Well, always exciting to have more football, but more high-level football. Like that's what the real excitement is, I think, for us football fans. And congratulations on the growth and the continued maturation. And we really appreciate the insight. Big fans of you. And yeah, just thanks for the time. And we're looking forward to the UFL after we wrap up this week.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. Right. Looking forward to it. We got the guys coming in here on the 27th. I think that was the fun thing last year is when the merger happened and you go from 16 teams to 8 teams. If we don't have a much more talented, deeper roster, then shame on us in football operations. And as the guys walked in, it was just like, whoa, these guys are legit. I mean, football bodies coming in, across the board. And I really think that was a thing that stood out for everybody last year was the depth in our offensive line, the depth in our quarterback play, because we had shrunk from 16 to 8, but that had an impact on the depth that was there. And I think that was a positive impact on the quality of the game week in and week out.
Well, thank you, Daryl. And hopefully we'll talk to you again soon. Congratulations and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.